Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan.
I'm Eric.
And I'm Dan.
And today we're going to tell you how we felt about Star Wars, or about Rogue One, a Star Wars story. And hey Dan, tell us a little bit about Rogue One.
Well, Rogue One is a direct prequel to Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, the original movie.
But I hate the prequels!
Yeah, I know, right? So, this movie is about the rebel team that steals the plans for the Death Star that Darth Vader's looking for at the beginning of A New Hope when he storms the Tantive 4 with a boarding party. Leia puts them in R2, sends them to Tatooine, and this is the story right before that, literally. So, yeah. It's the first in the anthology Star Wars films that we're going to get every other year, in addition to the mainline saga films.
Yep, it's a war movie, it's an espionage movie, and it should seem like an obvious thing to say that it's a war movie because it's called Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
But it's the most like traditional war movie we've had for a Star Wars film so far, which kind of helps being a standalone thing.
That's funny because that's not what I got from that movie. I got that it was a samurai movie.
Well, it's that too. But I don't think it's only like when you explain that to me, I agreed with that.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen a lot of
movies. It's also a war movie.
But it's also a war movie, and it's also an espionage thriller.
Yeah.
So, we are, it's unusual to have three people on how we felt about, and we're going to do a spoiler cast on Sunday, so we're going to make this as brief as possible, but Dan will not be available to talk with us on Sunday, so we want to make sure that he got to be in here and talk with us a little bit. So,
and I don't let Captain Logan make videos without me.
That's true, that's a thing. No, it's not. And unfortunately, he was like, do you really want me in here? I was like, no, totally. But unfortunately, Dan's not going to be able to talk about any of the juicy spoiler stuff. But so he will be as vague and overview as possible, and if he's not, I'll cut out things he says. So Dan,
I'll be as vague as when Jin talks about the blaster she has in this movie to one of the other characters.
Oh, is she really vague about that?
Well, it's a joke in the movie. I don't know if you remember it, but
I guess I don't. I guess I don't right on.
Okay.
Anyway, so Dan, I've seen the movie one time. Dan, tell us how you felt. Have you ever done one of these? How we felt about? You know how this works?
I have, I think.
Oh, yeah, Ant-Man!
Yeah.
Ant-Man,
yes.
Okay, so tell us how you felt about Rogue One, a Star Wars story.
Well, because I don't have a whiteboard, I'm going to dazzle you guys with my low-budget version of this.
Oh, I was hoping you were on your own.
This movie made me
if
feel...
I had a cape with my things on, that'd be amazing.
This movie made me feel like...
This movie made me feel like I was watching an expanded universe novel made into a movie instead of a book. I got the vibe
I said something
from
real
this,
similar last night.
Yep.
Yeah, pretty heavily that it was a movie made for people that like Star Wars.
He said exactly that.
I think that I wouldn't necessarily recommend seeing this movie to people that aren't big Star Wars nerds, because there's a lot of like deep Star Wars like lore callbacks and stuff. The character stuff is definitely interesting enough that it carried me through the movie, and it was an interesting like thread of a story to watch. But I think this is much more of a like Star Wars for Star Wars fans movie than The Force Awakens was. Not that movie wasn't. I didn't enjoy that movie because I did. I liked it a lot. But I liked this in that it was very tonally different from the saga films. It showed us a different side of the Star Wars universe, what it's actually like to live under the oppressive regime of the Empire. It kind of in like the expanded universe does, it expands the context of the original films, I think, quite a bit. You get to see the actual scope of power of the Empire. You get to see exactly how powerful some of the characters that we see in the main saga films in comparison to like the everyday person is. So I think in that way it is very much an expanded universe Star Wars thing, and I like that a lot about it. There are some things in the movie. It's not without its flaws. I did enjoy the movie very much. I think you guys should go see it, but we'll get into the flaws vaguely once you guys get into it, I suppose.
Did you want to throw out a worst thing if it can be ambiguous enough?
Probably the first third of the movie. I thought it wasn't very well edited. I think that a lot of the scenes in the first third of the movie were very superfluous and didn't need to be there, that we could have just cut them and expanded a little bit more with some of the tertiary characters that seemed interesting but weren't as developed as I would have liked necessarily. I think the two leads are developed well enough, and their arcs in the movie parallel well enough that I found them interesting and sympathetic by the end of the movie. But some of the characters, specifically like Donnie Yen's character and his friend there, I didn't I didn't really know much about them, and I would have liked to have known a little bit more because they were charismatic and likable, but they just weren't very well drawn. They're very thin characters. So, yeah, I would say that as my worst thing.
Go ahead and flip your sign, Dan.
I feel this movie, and I think you should go see it.
Are you aware of your feelings, Dan?
Yes, I am very much so.
Eric, how did this movie make you feel?
It made me feel like I was watching the movie that should have been made last year. This was an inventive, really like doing something different with Star Wars. This movie took risks. It did something new with Star Wars. It's everything that last year's movie should have been. Not saying that this movie literally should have been the movie that came out last year, but oh man, my big takeaway is either J.J. Abrams was everything wrong with the last movie and we're going to be clean sailing forward, or the episode film's going to be really watered down and all the good stuff's going to be in these Star Wars story things. I thought this movie was great. Cap told me last night he had the same problem as Dan for the first act of the movie.
I was not in it until the droid shows up.
I'm in it from scene one. My big thing when this movie ended was like, oh, this is a samurai movie, and like I had that from scene one. I was like, oh, we're making a samurai movie. We didn't go back to Lucas. We went back to the things Lucas went back to, and so like I really loved it for that. I loved all of the really, really deep pulls from Star Wars history and continuity and things like that. This made like a film. This felt like a film made for Star Wars fans by people that actually like Star Wars, as opposed to that last movie. So I really liked it. I was really, really blown away by it. And I implore you, go back to our last Geeks Not Nerds and listen to me talk about this movie.
You were not excited.
I was not excited. Like, this is not it's Star Wars, it's gonna be great. I can't wait to see this Star Wars movie. Like, I was against this movie.
You didn't want this period? You didn't want Vader?
I didn't like any of the trailers. Mm-hmm. No, this movie completely
You said
won
it
me
looked
over.
like a fan film.
I did.
And Dan, I started thinking he was right for the first 15 minutes. I was like, oh no, it's kind of what he was afraid of. It feels too contemporary. It feels like it's because it's hard to walk that line, right? Of it feels like it's made by Star Wars fans for Star Wars fans and just being a fan film. Mm-hmm. And I was afraid that was the territory we were in. And then once because it also feels like a pretty like joyless movie at the beginning, and then suddenly when the levity starts happening, and the levity happens when it should, but I'm not even really dogging on that about the beginning of it, but I was afraid it was going to be not Star Wars-y in that it wouldn't have much levity. Mm-hmm. And once it does that, and it's not caked on too hard, then I'm like, oh, it's not a fan film now. But for a minute, I was turning into Eric before this movie came out.
And it was so weird because I was immediately in love with this movie the second it started.
And he turned into me, and I turned into him because I was really excited about this movie, and like it ended up being exactly what I was hoping it would be.
I'm going to be very interested. We should talk after, Eric, about the samurai film stuff, because I'm not as well versed in that stuff as you. I'd like to know what parallels you saw. But I really liked that this movie showed the moral ambiguity of what war is for the people actually on the ground, as opposed to the big scale good versus evil thing that we have with the Jedi and the Sith that are the central conflict of the saga films. I really liked how morally ambiguous the Rebel intelligence agent was at the beginning of the movie. I was really into his character. I won't spoil like what his arc over the course of the film is, but and I also really liked how Jyn Erso as a character, as opposed to most of the other characters in the movie, was brought up under the boot of the Empire and doesn't know anything different, so she doesn't really see any hope or care for the state of the wider galaxy.
And she thinks it's a world she can live in. Yeah, and she's like, well, I mean, I've survived so far, so if I can live in this world, anybody can live in this world. Exactly,
and I loved that showing. Because this is a thing that I've always liked about the expanded universe and showing the inner workings of the Empire, in that the sort of cutthroat nature of it, how it's a detriment to the way that the regime is run. Like the real reason why the Death Star has these fatal flaws is because Krennic is trying to advance his career in the Empire and doesn't really tell people about the things that he knows, and those problems could be fixed if he actually spoke up. But he knows he's going to be choked out by Vader or demoted by Tarkin or something like that if he if he doesn't keep his mistakes under wraps. So I liked all of that stuff quite a bit. Yeah, it was really, really cool.
Eric, did you have a worst thing?
I did have a worst thing.
What is your worst thing?
The last scene of the film.
Yeah.
The last scene of the film, which is not the ending of this movie, and I hated it. It's pandering to the mainstream. It's for people who aren't really Star Wars fans. I don't know. I really didn't like the last scene of this film. And it ended beautifully, and then there's the last scene. But also, Dan said that he thought Donnie Yen was underdeveloped. He's my favorite character from this movie. He might be one of my new favorite Star Wars characters. I love Donnie Yen in this movie. I thought he was great.
I liked him a lot, but
he has the best line in the movie
because he was. Cool,
he does have the best line in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has the funniest line in the movie.
So yeah, I'm feeling it, and I did not expect to be feeling it. So that means something.
This movie made me feel like I was watching the summer blockbuster event of 1979 or 1980 in 2016. This is kind of based on a conversation Eric and I had last night. It's in a lot of ways it's kind of an old school action movie, and in the sense that there's a story that drives the action as opposed to the other way around.
They made a real movie. We don't do that anymore.
And it feels, and again, I didn't feel this way in the first 10 or 15 minutes, but after that, it kind of becomes, even though I know how we're doing effects and I know that there's a lot of CG and stuff, it feels like, it kind of feels like a 70s movie, or it feels like it lines up fine with the tone of A New Hope, and yet has its own flavor as well.
Well, and everyone's hair is period accurate.
Yeah, that helps. Well, and of course we saw some of that in the trailer, and you still said, well, this looks kind of fan filmy, and you weren't sure that going back and recreating that contemporarily, if you weren't going to use like the same kind of video quality and stuff, is a good idea. I do wish that some of it was shot grainier.
Yeah.
There are things that I think look a little too polished. Polish isn't the right word, because it still looks like a lived-in world and stuff. But I don't know, especially Vader. We talked about this yesterday.
Yeah, Vader. It's no spoiler. Vader's in this movie.
Yeah, right.
He looks off to me. I can't explain it. There's just something off about him. Okay,
I agree with you, Eric. Yeah.
Okay, he looks like a guy in a costume, right? Like he doesn't look like Darth Vader. And I don't mean a bad costume.
It looked a little too well made to me.
Yeah, and it was a little big, and his cape just covered a little bit too big. He was just slightly off.
We can talk about it after, maybe, but I had some problems with his voice, too.
Yeah, me too.
We might be able to get into.
For me, the best thing about this movie is the way it builds on the pre-existing mythology, and dare I say, makes A New Hope a better movie, which I would not think is possible.
I think it does, yeah.
I agree.
There's one major thing that, of course, I won't spoil if you haven't seen it yet, that makes me go, oh, this complaint we've had forever goes away. And
it also makes
perfect sense.
A thing in Force Awakens worse.
Yeah, no, that's true, and we'll talk about that on Sunday. It absolutely does, but forgetting that. I hate to say this, but I felt like after seeing this movie, I understood some of the Star Wars fans' complaints about 7 more. I don't want to say that I suddenly don't like Force Awakens because I liked this movie, and I want to be careful not to compare them too much. On the other hand, I have the same worry Eric does, that the episode movies are going to be the watered down for the masses movies, and that this is where we get to tell real stories. I'm a little concerned about that. I compared it to the Marvel Netflix shows. I think it's possible that these end up looking like the Star Wars Netflix shows. Where because they're smaller and it's not as big, we can take those kinds of risks because we're not worried about appeasing everybody, and the accessibility doesn't have to be quite as wide of a net. On the other hand, I'm going to disagree with Dan a little bit when he said that he doesn't know if he would show this to regular mainstream audiences because it's so much for Star Wars fans. I think they strike that balance really well, and I'm saying that as a not giant Star Wars fan. There were things that Eric had to point out to me. It's true that there's a whole lot more, and after a conversation I had with Steve in text this morning, Eric. I'm realizing just how much more of it there was even than I realized. I was not expecting so much building on from stuff in Clone Wars and even Rebels, and that's crazy that that's there, but it is. I didn't know Forrest Whitaker's character was a Clone Wars character.
I didn't know that, or I didn't remember
yeah,
that.
He is.
Interesting.
He is a Clone Wars character.
So this is the first time we've taken somebody that was in another medium in a Star Wars EU thing and made him important. It's not the first time we've ever done that. Boba Fett was in the Star Wars Christmas special first, but like it's the first time it mattered.
They even pulled from Knights of the Old Republic in this in some ways that we can talk about after, which I was ecstatic to see. It was so cool.
It pulled from an early draft of Empire Strikes Back.
Yes,
which is I lean over the cap because. Coincidentally, we had a conversation like a week ago.
It pays off. No, like 6 hours earlier. You told me that yesterday.
And I told you that on Monday.
Maybe so, but it was.
Yeah, it was recently.
It was real recent.
And I just leaned over. I was like, "Hey, remember I told you that thing?"
And I just, whoa! Because when you told me that before, I was like, "That's the coolest thing. Why is that not in the movie?" And now I'm watching it. There it is. It was amazing. No, I think especially by midway through, this becomes a really accessible movie. I like the building blocks, that foundation is very EU Star Wars, and it feels that way through the whole thing, which is again what I was hoping it would be. I'm like, why can't you tell a really good one and done story told in any pocket of and any time period of the Star Wars universe, and make it like a good 4-issue comic or a novel, but just put it on film instead, and that's exactly what we did, and that's so exciting. But man, it is the spectacle at the end is just wonderful.
I agree.
These are characters that are fun.
Inspired. Yeah.
I think this might be my second favorite space battle in all of Star Wars. After Return of the Jedi.
Absolutely.
I think this is a great space battle.
This is the first time in a long time that I've watched a battle that I've watched, like a big epic space battle, where I'm pretty sure everything I'm looking at is CG, and I'm still in awe of it. I'm actually marveling, even though I think I know how they did it.
Some of the Star Destroyers look like models.
There are places where I'm going,
okay,
I'm actually not totally sure that I know what you're doing, or like how you made this, and it's really cool. And there are, I don't know, I was surprised by how many surprises there are in this movie. Both because we know the big complaint a lot of Star Wars fans had going into this was, it's another prequel thing. We know what happens. Who cares? But like it's a story about these people and not just how did it happen? But like there's a character arc for at least her. But like a lot of people were like, this isn't going to add anything because we already know what happens. But again, as I said earlier, mythology-wise, it does, and it grows the universe. It makes it deeper, which I was really surprised by. But also surprises in the action because it kept subverting expectations toward the end. And I also should say it's really nice that you know why everyone is doing what they're doing and what is at stake, and like there's a real involved action scene that takes up the majority of the third act, and I always know where I am and why I'm supposed to care, and I do care, and that was really exciting to me.
Well, and on the building, the mythology stuff, it's amazing that this is a movie without Jedi that still adds and informs to the now growing new Jedi mythology.
And it's still about all the stuff Star Wars has always been about, just from a different perspective. So, Dan was talking about how it's cool that we get that kind of moral ambiguity when Star Wars is usually about just good versus evil, but it really drives home what has always been at the core of Star Wars, which is good and evil are a choice.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that's right at the core of it. And I love that we're able to talk about the Jedi, and that we're able to make the that whole idea that you always had with the original Star Wars of it's an ancient backwards religion, even though we had it just like 20 years before this. And people don't think that it's real, and they think it's an urban myth. This is the best that has ever been handled.
I agree. Yeah, for sure.
My worst thing.
Oh, I know your worst thing.
Can I say it?
I know your worst thing.
My worst thing is how Tarkin's handled. I can't deal with it. I don't like it. Can't recast him. Put somebody in there. Because it's a movie that will not look dated in 20 years except for that.
I agree.
Don't do that. I don't like. Steve and I argued about it.
Really?
Yeah, Steve was like, the second or third thing he said to me was CGI Tarkin is great, and I was like, no, it's not.
I looked at you the second he walked on screen
because you knew what I would say. It was Tron Legacy all over again. That's worse.
I think.
But
yeah.
But partly because he's like, it's as good as it could possibly look. I mean, they tried their hardest on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the special effects they use with him and another character that I won't spoil later on. I think it's the best I've ever seen that done.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't look like a real person.
And it still takes me out.
It looks significantly better than Tron.
Well, and that other person that you won't mention looks better than Tarkin.
No, it's the same problem I had with Tron Legacy, but it doesn't look like Tron. You're absolutely right. Keep him in the dark. When he's in the dark, he looks fine.
I would have been fine with if they just showed us the back of his head and his reflection, like in his introduction. Mm-hmm. That would have been fine with me.
Especially because he doesn't get so much screen time that we really need to see his face.
Right, yeah, I agree.
All that much? I don't think, but I also think you could recast him.
Well, and part of my problem with them not recasting him and making a CG image of him is that whoever's doing his voice has done a great job of studying how Peter Cushing talked, but not how he sounds. So his speech pattern is right, but his voice is off, and that's really disconcerting when it's him.
Because they're trying to make you think they're trying to make they're not trying to
trick you.
They're not trying to trick you, but they're trying to make you feel like you're seeing a Peter Cushing performance, but you're not getting getting that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Dan, I'm just so taken out. I want a performance. I want a real person. I don't care if he looks different.
And everyone else in this movie that's a pre-established character is recast, and everybody's fine with that.
So I don't mean to go on too long about that, but that took me out, and I thought, I don't know, I felt really bad for it because all of the CG beyond that will hold up in 20 years.
Yep.
It all looks great, especially the stuff that I couldn't tell you how they did. Anyway, I'm feeling it, and I have a new favorite droid. The droid in this is amazing. He's great. He's hilarious, but he's tragic, and it's. I was really impressed with the comic relief in this movie.
Two quick things.
Yes.
One of them's a minor problem with this film, and you and I both have this.
Yeah.
I don't know what anybody's name is.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing and a bad thing because they're not constantly saying people's names and writing unnatural dialogue.
There's not a lot of forced exposition. It felt like real people talking.
But I call Donnie Yen because I don't know what that character's name is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what anybody's name is in this movie.
Even the secondary lead, the rebel intelligence officer dude, I don't remember his name, to be honest with you.
Yeah. The other thing is, if you like this movie, I implore you go read the Rogue Squadron novels. They're legends. They don't count, but go read those. They're like this.
Which again, you're surprised you're saying.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. I'm surprised I'm saying.
I'm very excited that this movie was as good as it was because now I'm even more looking forward to the Han Solo spin-off movie and all the ones they do next because they're saying that they're going to do the Han Solo movie like a Western, and if it's at all like that, it's going to be great. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's Disney doing with Marvel, potentially with Star Wars, what they've been doing with Marvel, which is it's all set in the same universe, but you get different genres, which is tricky with Star Wars because it's already a genre. Like, superhero isn't really a genre, necessarily. You know, like, you can do anything in that.
But I think to Eric's point, the thing that excites me even more about these movies is that they're allowed to be standalone pieces rather than an ongoing narrative, where we're going to have these franchise movies that are going to be self-contained stories. And to be honest with you, I think half the reason why this movie feels as fresh as it is because it's a standalone movie.
Yeah.
We don't really do those anymore.
Yeah.
And it's such a tightly woven narrative.
Yeah,
and it's sandwiched.
Agreed.
Well, I was going to say sandwiched between a couple movies. It's right before A New Hope, and it's leading directly into that. And I dare say they probably watch Bouquet back to back.
Oh yeah, definitely. After watching this movie, I didn't have time, but it made me want to go home and immediately put in New Hope and watch it and see how my perspective on the movie changed, knowing all of this stuff, you know.
And and I will say there is a really cool bone thrown for, well, maybe a couple because of some of the Clone Wars stuff. There's a really cool bone thrown for prequel fans that I was surprised by and was not expecting.
Yeah,
I'm sure we all know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, there's a lot of stuff, like little references for Star Wars fans. One of the things that I forgot to mention, and I think, Cap, you might have something interesting to say about this as well, because you're the guy that always notices scores in movies.
Yeah.
I didn't really dig the score in this movie at all. I thought there were some really almost funny beats when certain characters showed up. I was like, that's really weird to put that Star Wars music cue there. I can't really go into detail about it without spoiling it, but I wasn't. It just felt like someone trying to do Star Wars, but it wasn't John Williams, which is what it was. But I felt like if it was done a little bit better, it wouldn't have felt like that. I don't know.
That's interesting because my big takeaway was that this is a score that feels consistent with Star Wars music, but also still its own thing. I liked the score.
Sure, yeah, fair enough.
I was a little surprised it was Giacchino. Giacchino now, just like J.J. Abrams, has gotten to do both Star Trek and Star Wars,
and he's done Marvel movies.
And he's done Marvel movies.
He does everything.
Yeah, he does everything. He did Jurassic World. He does everything. But Giacchino, he did Tomorrowland, I think. But nobody saw that but me. But anyway, I was just like with the movie. I had huge reservations about the score at the very beginning, mostly because of, hopefully I'm not giving away too much when I say this, mostly because of how something with the opening was handled. But then after that, I kind of disagree with you a little bit, Dan. I was impressed with how like little of the standard melodies came in, and when they came in, they felt earned, and they felt like that's the only thing that should go there. So I appreciated that. The rest of it, I like with a lot of Giacchino scores, I just wasn't even thinking about the score, which is probably a testament to it, honestly.
Yeah, sure. See, I felt like whenever they used any of the familiar melodies, they felt really weird to me, especially in some of the
really
they were
interesting.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it after we finish, I suppose. But yeah,
not with Vader though, right?
No, it was a different character.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dan, since you're not going to get to be there on Sunday, is there anything else, again, more kind of loose and ambiguous that you really wanted to make sure you got to get out?
I really liked a lot of the locations that they chose for this movie. I mean, I've talked about it in the trailers when we discussed those. I really like the sort of tropical planet Scarif that we see in the movie. That the big action scene at the end takes place on.
That was cool.
I really liked Jedha, the planet that we see Saul Guerrera's character on. There's some really cool Jedi mythology stuff that we shoot that's like gigantic and breathtaking. I think the scope and the scale of this movie is awesome. The directing is fantastic in that regard. Like, people always say Gareth Edwards is a really good like scale director. I didn't see the new Godzilla, so I don't necessarily know, like, you know, a lot of people said based on that movie they were expecting him to do like the really cool scale stuff, but like seeing like the Star Destroyers like come out of the shadows of the darkness of space and the Death Star and stuff, like all that stuff was beautiful. If anything, this is a visual spectacle you need to see in the theater. I saw it in IMAX 3D and I loved it. It was really cool.
Yeah, to add on to the locations, there's a location in the desert. There's a location that's been used in 1,000 movies. I know it best from Indiana Jones movie. And that location looks the same in every movie I've ever seen. They clearly shot there, but they digitally enhanced it so it doesn't look like that place.
Oh, that's cool.
I just know it because I know that place really well. But like I'm 90% positive I know exactly where they shot the scene, and they changed it so it looks alien. I really like that.
That is cool, yeah. And I do have to say, some of the it's really one of the cameos I thought was a little, or two of them I thought were a little gratuitous for the Star Wars, like, you know, cameo stuff. There were only two,
I know who you're talking about,
but there were two of them in specific that I was.
There's one in a crowd, right?
There's one in a crowd and then one at the very end. The one in the crowd, I was like, most people aren't even going to remember these characters.
Yeah, I sighed audibly, and Cap just goes, I don't know what you're signing about.
And I was just I wanted to sit in a different seat. Like, I would have sat in the front row because I just knew going through this there would be things that Eric would react to because I'm not a big Star Wars fan, and because he has different expectations with this movie, that I just knew there would be places where he would go, he would roll his eyes, or he would be like, what? No, or I expected at some point for you to go, no. And he'd just be like, I'm watching a scene. Seems like a perfectly reasonable scene. And so there's this part where he just goes, and I was like, just people walking. What are you talking? And then afterwards he told me what it was, and I was like, there's like, Okay, there are Star Wars people that are going to know that, but the majority of us would have no idea.
Oh, and there's continuity issues with that too.
Really?
Yeah. So
Okay,
a lot,
okay.
But I think it's telling that the things I have to complain about are
Yeah.
like some of the pacing issues in the beginning, the score, and gratuitous, like 2 gratuitous cameos. Everything else I really, really enjoyed. I would say that, like, I seem to like Force Awakens than you guys do at this moment in time, but I would say I enjoy this movie just as much as that one for different reasons. I think the fact that it's so tonally different is what excites me about it compared to those movies. Because I heard that they were doing reshoots for this movie to make it feel more like a Star Wars movie instead of like a dark, gritty war movie, and it still feels like that to me.
I think a lot of the
Maybe it needed it.
I think a lot of those like Star Warsy things, like those guys in the crowd. I think a lot of that's what ended up in the reshoots. I think we threw that.
You think
stuff
so?
in.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
'Cause
I don't
they were-
know that.
They were afraid that it would seem too far off the beaten path.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of things, especially what you're talking about with the end, that did not bother me like it did you. And I still say all you have to do is edit it differently, and he's fine. But but to your point, I kind of wonder if that wasn't mandated.
I kind of think it was. I think that script ends when that movie ends, and then we get that extra scene. I think that might be a reshoot scene.
That is probably a reshoot. I agree with you. It's funny too. Like if you think about like some of the Star Wars cameos, like the one in the crowd, if that's like a reshoot mandate, that is literally off the beaten path. Even for Star Wars.
I don't think that's a mandate. I don't. Unless they're like unless the note, Kathleen Kennedy, more Star Wars things. Then she gives a list of like, there are things that you could put in if you felt like it.
Yeah. Just seeing this movie makes my disappointment that the Boba Fett spinoff was canceled even more. Because, like, man, if the movies are going to be this good quality, like...
I heard Boba Fett was in the Han Solo movie.
If the Han Solo movie is also a Boba Fett movie, though, that's probably fine.
It's supposed to, at this point, we know it's supposed to be a Lando Han, like, buddy Western kind of movie.
Oh,
We
man,
don't
that's
know
so
who
my
the villain is
thing.
Yet. But if Boba Fett's a villain, that'd be awesome. But Josh Trank was supposed to do the Boba Fett spinoff movie, and then once he left, then it got canned. So
Dude,
we don't really.
Yeah, but I bet eventually we'll get it. I mean, like, I'd be
I
real
hope so,
surprised
yeah.
if that wasn't in like another wave down the road. But
I
Lethal Weapon in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's gonna be great.
Please.
It's gonna be great.
That sounds great. Yeah. Anyway, anything else anybody has got to say?
No?
All right, we'll see you Sunday night for the spoiler cast at 8 p.m. Central here on Geekvolution. Dan, thanks for joining us. I'm glad you got to put your 2 cents in.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me, guys. I really enjoyed this. Talking about Star Wars is always a good time, especially with new people.
If you have seen the film, feel free to tell us what you think about it in the comments.
No
Please do not
spoilers.
spoil anything. This is a movie I'm really surprised saying that I'm afraid people are going to get spoiled before they see it, because it's a movie that I would have expected. Who cares if you find anything out?
Again.
And it adds so much to the mythology you don't want to know.
Again, making it more than the movie last year that was so secretive and had basically nothing to spoil.
That's what he says anyway. Yeah. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching. Sure appreciate it. I'm Captain Logan. This was Eric.
This was Eric.
And Dan.
And I'm Dan.
And we'll see you again with more videos here on Geekvolution, and especially Sunday night live for our probably 1 hour spoiler cast.
do 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 do